Hey everybody, it's Georgia Wieben again, author of Penetration Testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking. Now out in, I think this is Chinese. I'll show you a few other languages as we go through this. I have all of them except English, oddly enough. I've run out of English copies. I give them away. Anyhow, so I'll be your instructor for this accompanying lab, of course. Good to see you all again. So we're going to look at something today called DNS zone transfer. So we already talked about DNS. Basically, that's what turns names that we understand, like pentesteracademy.com, into IP addresses that the computer understands that, at least if you're like me, you're likely to forget. So just another layer of abstraction between, how computers work with zeros and ones and things and, how human brains work. So we looked at in our previous lesson, we looked at some DNS reconnaissance. Today we're going to look at something very specific, a zone transfer. So like most things, DNS was not built with security in mind. It was built with functionality in mind. If you've ever built things, functionality wins all the time. Security always loses. So this idea of zone transfer, basically a DNS zone is, a list of all of those DNS names. We saw in our previous example, we had like mail.dnsrecon.com, mail2dnsrecon.com, private.dnsrecon.com. So we had all those domain names. Well, those are probably not all of them, but we found some DNS names and some of their corresponding IP addresses and whatnot. But the zone will actually have a list of everything that's, in that list. So, it would be great if we were on a pen test, if we had all those names, especially if they were like names like mail and NS for name server. So we would know, their functionality, and we could start looking for, open ports that are related to mail servers, for instance, and vulnerabilities that are related to mail servers. So, having that information would be really great, and, not having to do like a guess and check. So zone transfer would be a potential way to get that. This should always be turned off. If you have a client that has this on, absolutely this goes in the definitely turn this off. There's no reason why this should be on. So why it exists is basically because for redundancy, to make it so that, you've got your primary domain controller, and to make it really easy for the secondary one or any other subsequent backups to be able to get that full DNS zone really easily. It just allows the transfer, but hopefully you won't run into any clients that still have this turned on, especially on the internet, but you might. So definitely with all your clients, you should just check just to be sure. And, if you get lucky and find that they do have it on, one, you've got a good finding, and two, you've got, some more information you can use on your test. So let's, without further ado, actually get started. This one, like the previous ones, the DNS server is not in etcresolve.conf, so you are going to have to set it, the notes right here, as always, that it's going to be 192.xy.3, where x and y are your IP addresses. I will remind you once again and continually, because it happens in every class that I teach, and it happens to me all the time, let me admit it, that putting in the wrong IP address is the number one cause of things not working. So if things are not working, definitely make sure that you're using your system's IP address, because you have your own dedicated lab, which is not mine. So your IP addresses will be different. So make sure you use yours. So, start up your lab and whatnot and attach. And we're once again in Kali Linux. I've started up our terminal, and we will look at some things that are have graphical user interfaces in this class, but we will spend a lot of time in the Linux terminal if you haven't figured it out already. So, alright, so first thing, of course, I need to know my IP address, IP adder, and, mine, again, yours is different, 192.168.101.2, which means my name server is going to be 192.168.101.3. So yours will just be, 192. Whatever, and then .3. And so we have a couple of ways of looking at if there's a zone transfer or not. well, one of them, we're already familiar, assuming you're going in order, you're already familiar with NSLOOKUP. Let me do a clear to get rid of all that junk. So you're already familiar with NSLOOKUP. So let's start with that one, even though this one is not as clean as the other command we'll look at. But we have NSLOOKUP, and we do have to set the server. And I believe this time I copy pasted it right. Yes. All right. So you want to put in, remember that's a .3 at the end because we want to tell it not the IP address of our Kali machine, but for that DNS server. So yours, again, will be different than mine, but your last one will be a .3. So just tell it the server, and then we want to set type equals AXFR, I think. I'm a little dyslexic. I know those are all the right letters. Let's see what happens. And DNS recon. Well, we should probably look at the questions, right? I may be getting a little ahead of myself. All right, so the questions are how many address records are present for DNSRecon.com and its subdomains using the host command and the NSLOOKUP command. So I started with number 2 because we're familiar with NSLOOKUP already. I figured that would be a good place to start. So let's see. Okay, it looks like God, I can't. AXFR. Yeah. Google is your friend, guys. Yeah, I'm totally dyslexic. That could have been wrong. So the type to try a zone transfer, I mentioned Google. Man pages are also nice. So, once I exit out of here, I'll show you a man page real quick in case you're not familiar. If you're, happen to be internetless, maybe at a government place and you can't Google man pages, that's short for manual, they can also be really helpful. So it looks like, this is not as clean as our host command, but it looks like, we've got primary, secondary, MX2. We've got, you can count. Oh, look at this. The secret flag.dnsrecon.com. Well, that looks like something that might be interesting to us. Who knows? Just a thought. Anything that calls itself in elite speak the secret flag generally gives me a reason to think it might be interesting. Primary, reserve, secondary. And yeah, you can count them. But they're actually going to be the same. So yeah, let's exit out of this. I'm not sure what the exit command is exit. Sometimes it's quit, sometimes it's quit and you have to give it braces. Yeah. Sometimes I'm going to get it wrong, but I was right that time. All right. But, it also mentions, if we look back, how many records are with the host command. So we haven't seen the host command yet. The host command is just, another way we can play with DNS, really. So actually the flag for doing a zone transfer with host is -L. Oh, I said I would show you a man page. So man host. So this is just, a manual page for that command host. So you'll see these for C functions and things like that. And built-in commands. So, here's -L, list zone. The host command performs the zone transfer of the zone and prints out the name, server pointer, and address records. So, if we didn't know what the right flag was, then, we could just use the man page or Google. Q to get out of a man page. So, it could also be Q. It might be exit. It might be quit. It might be Q. It might be Control C. Different things happen. All right, so anyway, host-L and DNSRecon.com. And we do need to tell it our name server. Again, if you're doing this on your home machine, because again, this is all legal. We're just, doing a reconnaissance. So, if you were doing this against, say, your own domain, you would not necessarily have to put in that name server because your computer automatically will get a name server when it hooks up to your router in your house. See, this one's a little bit cleaner, right? And what's funny about this is they're completely different than what we saw in the previous one. Remember, we were doing, and it was NS and NS2 and whatnot, but and again, we see the secret flag.dnsrecon.com. So might be interesting, might be not. That's up for, you guys to figure out as a challenge at this point. But, you can count them. I think there's 9. I think that's the answer. But, yeah, I'm not just going to, take my word for it. The lab manual says there's 9. If there's not, then we'll change it. But, yeah, there's a couple of ways that we can do DNS zone transfers. Again, this should always be turned off. If you have a client that's got it on, well, 1, you got this great information here, but 2, definitely that's a finding on your report. Again, this was, functionality over security. It happens, especially internet facing. This should never be on. But definitely, with all your clients, try it. Most of the time you're probably going to get, nothing. But definitely always check it out, because you don't want to miss a finding like that. They definitely need to know if that's there. So yeah, a pretty quick one here. And yeah, that's all we've got for this time. Hope you enjoyed it, and looking forward to see you next time. Have a great day.